Hello everyone, it's Karen at the Cool Tools Studio. I'm here today to show you how you can use extruded coils of metal clay, or any flexible clay really, to create a knit-looking pattern on your pieces. For this technique, you need a clay board, some sanding pads, a clay extruder, an ultra clay pick, a snake maker, a silicone-tipped clay shaper, and then if you'd like to add a stone, you need a CZ or a nanogem, something that can be fired up to the temperature of the clay that you're working with. You'll also need some precision hole punches if you're setting a stone, a scalpel, a large brush for dusting, some cool slip, and a wonder roller. You also need some clay thickness rolling frames, some clay. I'm using FS999 Fine Silver Clay because it has a very long working time, and this method requires twisting some coils, and it's not going to dry out and crack on me while I'm doing that. You need a template for whatever shape you'd like to create your pendant in. I'm using long tourmaline, some tough cards, a dish for water, and then a little brush to apply the water. For this technique, I'm going to start off by rolling a piece of clay that's going to be the back plate that I'm going to be applying the coils to. So I'm prepping my work surface with some cool slip, and that was enough for both my work surface and my clay roller. And I'm going to be rolling to 3 cards thickness for this back plate. And I'll usually kind of roll in one direction, set my clay down the other way, roll it in the other direction to get a shape generally the size of the shape that I'm going to be shooting for there. But for this technique, I like to leave myself some edges to apply the twisted coils to and everything, and then I'll come back and press this template down to kind of help apply those coils and then give myself a nice clean edge. So I'm not going to start off by pre-cutting my shape. So now that I've got the sheet ready to apply the coils to, I'm going to go ahead and start extruding the coils. And again, for this technique to work, you need to be working with a clay that has a very long working time. FS999 is super moist, super soft, and I'm not worried at all about my coils cracking as I'm manipulating them. I'm putting some clay into my extruder and then putting on the smallest round little hole that they had, twisting this back on to hold it in place. And then you twist the back of this to push the clay forward and start the extrusion. So for this technique, I'll usually extrude more than I need because you need a little bit of material to kind of hold on to as you twist the coils. And so here I am holding them at the top, and then I twist in one direction this time, and then for the next coil I'm going to be laying next to it, I'm going to twist in the other direction. So if I'm holding it like this, I'm taking my right hand and I'm rotating forwards. So I'm putting that twist in the clay, and then I'm going to set it down really quick to put some water where I'm going to be applying it, and I'll have to kind of retwist it a little bit before I actually go ahead and attach it to my piece. But I'm just laying some water on my clay to give the applied clay something to stick to a little bit. And FS999, again, is an ideal candidate for this process because it also makes really good connections with just water. So I'm laying my coil down and I'm pushing just a little bit on this edge that again is longer than the final piece that I'll have to give it something to stick to. So I'm going to repeat that process and extrude a little more clay. And then this time, again, I'm holding at the top here, I'm going to be twisting towards myself. And that's what's going to make these kind of have that intersection. That's going to make it look like a knit pattern. So I'm twisting towards myself for the second one. And then when I lay it next to the previous coil, because I do get that really lovely kind of intersection there that makes this look like 2 rows of knit material. After I put 2 on, I'll usually dampen my brush and come back in with some water. And I'll attach them both to each other and to the back plate. So again, it depends on how big of a piece you're making, how many times you repeat this, but I'm just going to continue this set of one twisted in one direction, one twisted in the other direction, over and over until I've filled the area that I'm going to be cutting with my template. So again, this time holding with my left hand, and I'm twisting away from myself for the first one again. And again, I'm kind of adding a little bit of pressure on the ends there to get it to stay. And just as I'm going, again, I'll kind of come in with my template and just keep filling until I've reached all the way to both of these, to the outside edge of my template so I can cut my shape. So I've been going along and using my template to check to see if I've filled the whole area that I desire to be filled. And I'm at that point now. So I'm going to be taking my template and pressing down to, again, kind of squish and apply those coils a little bit more, but then also give myself an edge. And before I do that, I'm going to take some Cool Slip again, and I'm going to spray it on the side of my template that's going to go against my clay. That was plenty. And I'm just kind of distributing my fingers around the edge sort of evenly and doing one press, and then I'm going to come down a little bit and press some more. Then I'm going to pop it off, and then I'm going to follow that outside edge to cut. If I were to try to cut inside with the template down, you can kind of catch on some of those coils and drag them and disrupt them a little bit. But by going along on this outside edge that everything's been really compressed and squished, I'm not worried about that. And this is going to be kind of a different edge. Once I pull off the clay, you'll see it sort of ends up round out, but I'm going to end up adding a coil along that outside edge to hide any sort of places where it's not perfectly pushed down and anything like that. And again, I love using FS999 for this type of project because some clays, it'd be really hard to take it after it's been sitting there for a little bit and get it reincorporated and have it behaving nicely. It might be cracking a little bit, but not FS999. It's going to all fold back into itself really nicely, and if I put this in a clay hydrator, it'll be perfectly good to go for another project. It's not at all dried out from sitting there on my work surface for a little bit. So at this point, I'm going to be swapping out the end on my extruder, and this is just a silly little tip, but when it's all the way compressed down like this and you try to take it off, the pressure on it can make it difficult to do. So there was one time where I was like, oh no, this is really stuck, I can't get it. All I had to do was come back here and relieve the pressure and then try to unscrew this top. I spent like 5 minutes fussing with it and it did not have to be that hard. So I'm popping out the small round and I'm going to be swapping it out with the larger round. And I'm taking some of this clay, I don't need all of it, to extrude to give myself an edge. And the rest of this is going to go back for another project. Screwing this back on. And then twisting down to extrude some clay. I'm going to be dampening that edge that I'm going to be applying this coil to. And then I grabbed a scalpel to cut where they overlap because it's a little bit thinner than the ultra clay pick, and it's a little bit easier to make the ends meet up when you cut it with that instead. So I'm just kind of going around the shape and kind of patting it into it a little bit. Bringing this one around. And I'm going to decide that this is where I'm going to overlap. And again, if I came in with this round, I'd be removing a little bit more material than if I'm cutting with a narrower tool like a scalpel or a tissue blade. And I'm going to use water to get these ends to meet up. And then this might be an opportunity to bring in the clay shaper to get a little bit more drag, to kind of get these two ends really together. And then once it dries, I'll be able to go in and fill and make that seam completely invisible. So at this point, if you wanted to add a set stone, again, you're going to want to use a punch or something that isn't going to have a lot of drag. Like if I tried to cut a circle to place this into, I'd end up kind of distorting the coils where they are. But if I'm just punching out and going straight down and up, that's a better way to go about that for this project. So I've got a little set stone here. You could use a setting mold or precision hole punches, however you'd like to set your stone. And then just kind of wherever you'd like to put it. I kind of like the balance of it being a little bit lower towards this point, but not all the way in the middle. So I'm just doing an off-center punch there. And then I'm just going to dampen with some water. And then just kind of push them down in. So at this point, I'd be ready to take this off to dry, and then I could come in and revisit and refill that little crack there if I wanted, and then apply a bail to the back, however you want your piece to hang. But because FS999 does such a good job holding on to moisture, and again, having a really long working time and everything, it does have a little bit of a tendency to dry unevenly, which causes some curling. So you can either, if you want your piece flat, you can keep an eye on it and flip it as it dries. If you notice it starting to curl, just come in and flip your piece. Or you can just let it curl and go with that. I kind of really like the gentle slope that the pendants took as they were drying, and I just let them go for it. And once they were dried, I went ahead and on these pieces, I attached a little bail that I had just made by taking those coils of clay that I had extruded just like before and twisting and just wrapping around a mandrel of sorts, and then I just used a scalpel to cut them in half. Once your piece is dried and you've done any additions and any sanding and refinement that you need to do, you're ready to clean up your stone with some alcohol and then fire it. FS999 fires at 1650 for 2 hours, and if your shape has dimension or isn't perfectly flat, has a bail on the back, you're going to want to fire it with a little bit of support. So I fired these in alumina hydrate in a fused silica dish. To really make the applied texture on these pop, I went in with some black max to darken the low areas, used a yellow sanding block to take it off the high spots, and then tumbled them to bring them up to a shine. I really love this method of twisting coils to create this applied knit pattern, and I'm thinking it could create some really cool pieces beyond just pendants. Up next, I'm going to use RES Bright Bronze Clay, which also has an excellent long working time, to create a cuff. I hope you feel inspired to try this method too, and I can't wait to see the pieces that you create using it. Thanks for watching.